for the beauty of silence. On a day when the wind is perfect, the sail just needs to open, and the world is full of beauty. Today is such a day. If today, then when? If not today, then when? So in the next few minutes, I want to explore with you, in some way anyway, the notion of the understanding of beauty and what is the source of beauty. There's a book came out recently in London by somebody called Marguerite Shakespeare, appropriately. And the book is called Beautiful. And you may be surprised by the subject. It's the teachings of the Buddha. And she thought of that title because of a little-known story in the Dhammapada, where Ananda, the disciple of Buddha, comes up to the master and says, "Lord, I have really finally realized that one half of the entire teaching is the contemplation of and union with beauty." And the Buddha replied, "No, Ananda, the whole of the teaching is the contemplation of and union with beauty." So what is the contemplation of and union with beauty? And when and where are we ever going to contemplate the notion or the union with beauty, if not now? So right here we are, you and I, hundreds of us sitting in this hall, together, breathing the same air. Where is the beauty here? You might look at these structures, this rather strange, peculiar, Baroque, Italianate ceiling and think, well, I'm not sure I find that too beautiful. Or maybe you do. Is beauty a question of taste or aesthetic judgment? Or is it something more? What is the beauty of this moment that we're living now? Because again, if not now, then when? My first teacher was a French, 19th century French novelist. His name was Stendhal. He wrote books like The Scarlet and Black, The Red and the Black. But what I loved about Stendhal, or his characters, was that they were always searching for what he called in his books moments of beauty. And so in my early 20s, when I lived in London, and worked in London, I would spend my lunch hours, very eagerly trying to collect moments of beauty. I'd sit down, in Trafalgar Square and look about me at whatever happened to be about me, the people, the rain, the billboards, and trying to feel myself into what Stendhal was meaning when he was speaking of moments of beauty. Every now and then, I woke up to what he meant, but I woke up to what he meant only when I forgot myself. So when there was no longer anyone really looking or anyone really trying to do something like collect moments of beauty, then somehow miraculously everything around me shone. So when we say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I don't think that just means that beauty is a relative notion, but that the source of beauty is somewhere in our seeing itself. And above all, in the kind of seeing in which the seer has been forgotten. I forgot who I was, said John on the cross. The world abandoned me, and I fell into the white lilies. White lilies are a symbol of resurrection. So, if we're to begin to understand the value of beauty itself for us, we're beginning to understand the value of the world of form. The way in which form itself, this apparently illusory world, can serve to awaken us by our being willing to become intimate with it. Actually, this is another expression of what Tantra is. A deep intimacy with the world of form. And in the West, I think one of the great languages that we have to encourage this intimacy with the world of form, with what is around us right now. I mean, just let's take a moment here. Again, let me ask you, what is the beauty of this moment? Not for an answer, but for a feeling into that question, because this is the moment we've got. Is it the light in the hair of the person in front of you? Is it your feet on the ground? Is it the way you're breathing or feeling? The question, what is this beauty? So the language, or one of the great languages in the West that can really help us toward that intimacy is the language of the arts, by which I mean all of the arts, poetry, painting, architecture, can shape us in such a way that we can forget ourselves and be returned to ourselves. I'm thinking of a painting by Van Gogh. You've probably seen at least reproductions of it. The painting is of a pair of boots. It's a pair of old working men's boots. Just that, surrounded in a luminous yellow glow of light. They're his own boots. And they're not just boots, though, as we continue to look at it, or as I do. They're somehow holding the dignity of human work, of the struggle that we all know in one way or another for survival, for meaning, for value. Somehow Van Gogh holds that, or manages to capture that in the most ordinary of things, a pair of boots. So that for him to be able to do that, he clearly must have seen something in those boots that was far more than what most of us ordinarily see. Something in the quality of his looking illumined those boots for him. And I would say it's something that was deeper than his psychology, deeper than his thinking and feeling mind. Is the essence of he saw with essential eyes, and that enabled him to paint the beauty of those boots. The same for Vermeer, the milkmaid pouring milk into I mean, what can be more ordinary than that? Why bother to paint a painting of somebody pouring milk? I mean, what's so valuable about that you need to show that to other people? But no, what Vermeer had done in that painting was to somehow again find the luminosity or the radiance in the most simple and ordinary of activities. Pouring milk. But for the last 400 years, people have been standing in front of it in awe. Something in Vermeer's looking was more than many of us normally are able to do with our looking. So those kind of paintings, poetry, certainly for me, have educated my looking and listening. And in that way have opened the world. Of course, one of the great poets of the beauty of the everyday world is Mary Oliver. You probably know her poem Mindful. Every day I see and hear something that nearly kills me with delight. Leaves me feeling like a needle in a haystack of light. It's what I was born for. To look, to listen, to lose myself inside this soft world, to instruct myself over and over in joy and acclamation. Nor am I speaking about the exceptional, the fearful, the very dreadful, but of the ordinary, the drab, the very drab, the daily presentations. Oh, good scholar, I say to myself, how can you not help but grow wise with such teachings as these? The untrimmable light of the world, the ocean's shine, the prayers that are made out of grass. How can you help but not grow wise with such teachings as these? The oceans shine. The prayers that are made out of grass. Of all the things that I think we tend to feel struck with the wand of beauty, I think the human face probably is the one that most strikes us more than almost anything. And by the way, this world that we've heard today, which is so true, is just on the edge of a precipice, on the edge of a great chasm of disaster, climate-wise, civilization-wise, in so many ways. At the same time, this world is the world from which Mozart, Beethoven, Handel have emerged. Rilke, Rumi, Shakespeare have emerged. The human spirit is just extraordinary for all the iniquity and horror we see around us. That is part of the beauty of you and I actually being able to be here today. I saw a photograph, I think it was the Times a few weeks ago, of a woman lying in a hospital bed that her nurses had wheeled into the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And she was in the last day or so of her life, she was suffering from ALS, and she had one wish before she died. She wanted to see a late Rembrandt self-portrait. What would your wish be? What moment of beauty in your life that you treasure still now would you like, if not to remember, at least to be able perhaps to witness or to experience one last time? For her, it was to be wheeled into the Rijksmuseum. And to just such a touching photograph. You know, this woman there, she couldn't move, ALS. She couldn't move, and there were all these nurses around her, and there was Rembrandt. Now, you know, she could have chosen, you know, some luminous Vermeer painting. She could have chosen Monet's water lilies. What would you have chosen? I mean, she could have chosen all manner of things. Why did she choose a painting of this rumpled old man, you know, nearly all black and browns with just a little dash of red? What was it about that made her want to see him one last time? Well, I had not similar because I don't have ALS, and at least to the best of my knowledge, I'm not quite ready to drop at this moment. But I had my own experience with a Rembrandt self-portrait in London a few years ago. And you know, it's one of those days, you know, the National Gallery in any country, but certainly London's National Gallery is huge. And it was raining, so I went in and thought I'd spend an hour walking through. And you know, after a little while, for me at least, National Galleries start to get pretty exhausting. I mean, you walk through the Renaissance, and there's all the gold angels bending over Mary, you know, so you do that, and then you go through it, and suddenly you're in the 18th century, and there's all these men in sort of powdered wigs, and, you know, women in flouncy ballroom attire, you know, all that. And that's around the time when I, anyway, start to sort of have my own sort of visions floating before me, and they're of cappuccino. You know, I see it, and the cappuccino is sort of leading me over there through those rooms, you know, towards the cafe. I'm already in there. And I was doing that literally. You know, well, that's like being possessed by an idea of a cappuccino. And on my way to the cafe, by the way, that's why museum shops do so well. But on my way to the cafe, I was going through one more arch. And suddenly I just noticed out of the corner of my eye over there, a pair of eyes. I turned, and I just felt I just had to walk and sit in front of this painting. I didn't know who it was, didn't know what it was. I had to sit in front of this painting because these eyes they were gazing at me. They were telling me to get over there. And this guy that I was sitting in front of, you know, had clearly had a pretty hard time in his life. I mean, his whole face was rumpled, and, you know, he was like this. His posture was, you know, just bent, and he was positioned like this, and he was just looking out. And I just felt overwhelmed by this man's honesty, deep, deep honesty. He was saying to me, this is it. This is what I look like. This is who I am. No nips, no tucks. This is it. You see me. Psychologically, you see my tenderness, my vulnerability. And as I sat there, I could feel my spine becoming straighter. My head on my neck was more erect. And I could feel, yes, you see me too. I felt seen by this painting. And I thought, I too, you see me, you see my bald head, you see my wrinkles, my anxieties, my aspirations, my hopes and fears, you see me. Human to human, person to person. We are aging, we are dying, we are full of sorrow, we're full of life, we're beautiful. We're beautiful. However we are. So I think I know why that woman asked for her bed to be wheeled into the Rijksmuseum. Yeah. He returned me to myself. I was humbled into acknowledging the truth of who I was. Humbled, by the way, the root of that word is humus, comes from the same etymological root as humus, but also humus meaning, not the thing in the Middle East, but soil, and humor. Humor, humus, humility, all have the same etymological root. Yeah. Rumi said, "You suppose you are the trouble, but you are the cure. You suppose you are the lock on the door, but you are the key that opens it. Why do you want to be someone else? You don't see your own beauty, your own face. Yet no face is more beautiful than yours." I came to realize that probably in the deepest way, the way that I ever have, in Iran 3 or 4 years ago. You may have noticed that I'm English, and the thing about English, I'm not only English, I'm white and I'm male. So look, excuse me, but I'm born entitled. There's just a kind of entitlement that comes, you can't help it. There's about 400 years of entitlement that happen, even though it's totally unjustified, we know that, but it's part of how it is. So I've tended to sort of assume, that I can, if I have an inspiration or idea, I can just follow it and all will be well and it'll be fine. And, if I want to go to Iran because I want to write a book on the humanity of the people of Iran to counteract all the other stuff, then I can do that and it'll be fine. Well, it was fine and it wasn't fine and it was fine. The book was called Saved by Beauty, and I'll tell you why it was called Saved by Beauty. I was there for a couple of months, and I went all over the place, met all kinds of people, and on my way out of the country at the airport, I was taken by the intelligence services, who said they wanted me for questioning. And they took me back to Tehran. For the next couple of days, I was interrogated over and over, always the same questions. You know, I mean, they knew all the questions, they knew all the answers. I mean, they'd hacked into my email account, they'd listened to every phone call, they knew every single meeting I'd had, they knew everything. But that wasn't the point. We had to go through the thing, you know. And this, by the way, was with a pair of very burly men in baggy black suits. It was really like a B movie, except it was not a B movie. And I'm genuine, this is the truth. They came in and they were cracking their knuckles. So after a couple of days of the same questions, you know, you're a spy, and, you know, we know you say you're writing a book, but we know you're not, and all of that. They said at the very end, you're very fortunate. We're going to give you a choice. And by the way, you see this, your passport, your English passport? It's worthless. Worthless. And they threw it across the floor. You may never get out of here, they said. But we are going to give you a choice. You can either spend 5 years in Aveen prison, or you can work for us. Well, what would you have done? Well, I said, I think I'd be quite happy to work for you. You know, they wanted me to report on non-governmental activities from agencies in England and America in Iran. So, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation, you know, who they knew I'd had some connection with. Just tell us what's happening with what they're doing, what the Rockefellers are doing in Iran, for example, like that. So I said, okay. And they said, well, we're going to leave you now, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Right? So you've agreed, right? Yes. Okay. We're leaving. We're back in 5 minutes. And you consider really if this is what you want to do. So 10 minutes later, nobody had arrived. Nobody had come back. Half an hour later, no one had come back. An hour later, I was still there on my own. And in that hour, I came to know 2 or 3 things. First, I came to know that I was utterly alone. However many wonderful friends I had, however much I knew I was loved, existentially, I was alone. Nobody knew where I was. And even if they did, there's nothing they can do about it. Think for a moment of the Washington Post correspondent who right now is in Aveen prison and has been there for a year. He comes from Marin County. Before he left, he knocked on my door with a gift of a carpet in thanks for the book that I'd done, which did come out. So, I realized that the story that I thought was my life, Roger, the writer who lives in San Francisco, who has these dear friends and lives here, and that whole story, it's a fabrication in my neurons. I could see that that entire story of who I thought I was completely irrelevant in that situation. It dissolved. There was, I mean, as far as I know or knew, I would be spending the next 5 years there. That story that I become so fond of, oh yeah, no, I'm Roger. You know, all that stuff. Everything that Caroline Mace was speaking of, that's me. Yeah, it all fell away. And yet the extraordinary thing for me in that moment was realizing that although that story fell away, I was still there. Something was still there. It was like a current, an aliveness, a presence of being that I wasn't thinking about, I wasn't trying to create or remember, but there it was. And I realized that that is and was the beauty of my life, that light. And at that moment, the two burly black suits walked back in, and I saw that they were no different to me. That they were wearing the costume and they believed that they were doing what they needed to do, which they were. But I could see that they were exactly the same as me. They were beautiful. They were beautiful. I've got to end, so I'm going to end very quickly with a final poem by Rumi, which is what that hour taught me. Be helpless. Be helpless. Dumbfounded, unable to say yes or no. Then a stretcher will come from grace to gather us up. We are too dull-eyed to see that beauty. We say we can, we're lying. We say, no, I don't see it. That no will behead us and shut tight our window onto spirit. So let us rather not be sure of anything beside ourselves, and only that, so miraculous beings come running to help. Crazed, mute, lying in a zero circle, we shall be saying with tremendous eloquence, lead us, lead us. When we have surrendered to that beauty, we shall be a mighty kindness. Thank you.